briefing for Tuesday, the 13th of June. I'm Stephen Ridgway. There is now a proof of concept. There is proof of concept code to exploit the MOVEit vulnerability, which was the remote code execution vulnerability. So MOVEit, there have been a handful of vulnerabilities that have come out in very short succession, but there is now proof of concept code out there, easily available, and so as if you need to be reminded, but really seriously, if you haven't patched yet, it's high time that you did. Proof of concept code, by the way, was apparently created by reverse engineering the patches, which is a timely reminder that the old approach of patch in cycles, leave it for a little while and see what happens and blah blah blah. It's no longer really a good approach. I mean, I've worked in organizations that take service delivery incredibly seriously, and they would stage their patches through various forms of development, testing, user acceptance, blah blah, all the way through to production, which meant that production could be lagging anything up to 2-3 weeks behind the most recent patch cycles. If that is your approach in your organization, I can understand why, but just be aware that it is very common these days that as soon as a patch is released, there are some very clever people that will start to reverse engineer that patch and create their own exploits from it. So that is happening increasingly rapidly. So the turnarounds between patch being, vulnerability being identified, patch being made available, and proof of concept exploit code becoming publicly available is a lot shorter now than I think it used to be. But if you are using MOVEit, really seriously make sure it is properly patched up to date and everything about it is looking hunky-dory, because you can imagine the number of scripted attacks that are now going to be. So I came across an article on Dark Reading that talks about a Russian language threat group using a novel loader to download malware. So they are actually encoding the first stage of the malware into a PNG image. So it starts out with phishing as always, but if you click on the image, it then downloads a PNG which has an encrypted malware hidden within the image itself. So the attack begins with what's being called double finger multi-stage loader, drops an image file, and then infects the victim's machine with Greeting Ghoul, which is a stealer specially designed to siphon off cryptocurrency credentials. But that isn't the only thing that can be downloaded in this way. There've been reports that the Remcos rat is also been downloaded in this way, so quite interesting. But it just goes to show, when you're doing these you're doing these courses and whatever, and you get onto the one about stenography, everybody's like, oh, isn't that interesting, but oh, come on, what can you do with it? Well, the answer is, yeah, it does actually get used in the real world. So basically the shellcode that is the shell code that is run when you click on the image in the phishing email gets and drops the image and then looks for a particular string within that image. When it identifies that string, it knows that the subsequent X number of bytes is an encrypted payload. Very clever indeed. So yeah, there we go. That is interesting. And one of the things that this does, by the way, which is kind of an aside from the interesting bit about it being an actual real world use of stenography to deliver malware, but just be aware, it can ask you for, so the Green Ghoul cryptocurrency stealer will ask you for your crypto wallet's seed phrase. So if you've got a crypto wallet, you'll know what that is. But for those that don't, it's basically it's a 12 or 24 word phrase that is used to generate the private key. So basically, it is about the most sensitive of all things to do with your crypto wallet, and there can be no circumstances under which anybody else should be asking for or using or seeing your seed phrase. So if something asks you for the seed phrase, it is probably, and you're not expecting it, as in you're not setting up a new wallet or something, it's quite possibly malicious. You should not give your seed phrase away to anybody. So that, I think, is that's a good takeaway. But yeah, otherwise, if you've got email protection suites, do make sure that they are looking for stenography in any images that are linked to or downloaded from emails. So UK doctors hold data in with various third parties. One of them is Lantern, which is an online locum doctor agency. Lantern has left an S3, God, it's difficult to say that, has left an unsecured S3 bucket out that has data related to its old backend system. So there are potentially 98,000 files relating to thousands of individuals that have been made available through the unsecured bucket. This is the sort of stuff, obviously, that can be used for blackmail, identity theft, the usual sorts of things. So yeah, what can you do about it? Well, I think if your personal details are in that, there's not much you can do. They have probably been taken by now. But just the message from this is, please test to make sure that your S3 buckets are properly secured, and that if it's anything to do with stuff that you're not using anymore, make sure that it's just not there anymore. Don't leave things. Old back-end systems should not be just left to rot in cyberspace. A little bit of good news on the data protection side of things. There is an agreement now, there's a pending agreement that the US and the UK will have reached to create a data bridge. There have been some on and off issues around the previous methods, and we've spoken about some fines that organizations have had for sending data to the States outside of any lawful agreed framework. So the previous data privacy framework was ruled unlawful under GDPR. However, this has now been fixed, as it were, between the EU and the US, and it looks like the UK is going to come in line with the new agreement. So I think we can all breathe a sigh of relief that there is now at least a legal way in which we can share data between the UK and the US. And then finally, from me, a very interesting and quite amusing article from Graham Cluley, who's picked up on the fact that the UK law firm Knights who've kind of lost the plot when it comes to phishing their own, phishing training, not really training, just phishing their own staff. So, as you may not be aware, but Knights has recently been through a round of pay rises and so on and so forth, which have generally been not well received. So not very low increases, general dissatisfaction from the staff, the usual sort of stuff. And they've chosen the time shortly after that to send out an internal phishing test, which along the lines of after assessing the current salary structure, it was discovered you're due for a double-digit annual salary increase, blah, 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 cordially the HR team. And unsurprisingly, people clicked on it. Can you imagine the dissatisfaction with, I mean, just using that as your phishing test email? Yes, okay, malicious actors might well do that sort of thing, but the stupidity from a behavioral perspective of doing that after you've given everybody a really shitty or no pay rise is just staggering. You clearly haven't got any idea at all about human psychology. So I thought that was quite amusing. Not personally greatly in favor. In fact, I think mildly against phishing your own people, unless it's done in the context of some very specific training around identifying phishing emails. And absolutely, if people get it wrong, it's used as a learning process, and it's not used as a kind of name and shame, which is very much what most organizations do. They, from what I've seen and in places I've worked, most phishing tests are dropped on people at times when they're not expecting it. And if you make a mistake and click on the thing, you're publicly ridiculed. So phishing your own people in that way is simply a way to take an otherwise satisfied, happy and motivated workforce and turn them into a bunch of disgruntled and unhappy and therefore less productive people. So anyway, that's enough from me for one morning. I will speak to you all again.